The Faustian pact is where the Lord has, or where Satan has promised, if you help me overthrow God and his kingdom, I will make you wealthy and I will make you famous. And there have many iterations of the Faustian pact, not only with Faust itself. For example, many rock bands of the most horrible acid type rock have admitted, that they've had a pact with the devil. They were promised to be wealthy. I think Andrew Lloyd Webber, for example, in writing the Phantom of the Opera, had made a pact with the devil. Not to mention that there were some of the songs that were plagiarized from other classical music and things, but nevertheless, he was revealed to him some very dramatic melodies, which were very catchy. And the Phantom of the Opera is a very dark opera. It's about, coming to the dark side and rejecting the light and all those types of things. Those are indications of a satanic pact with the devil, and it made tremendous hits around the world. He became fabulously wealthy. And of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber created Joseph and the Technicolor Coat, which was a rock opera demeaning Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, and other things. He that was going to thrash the world descend into chains, and they say unto Satan, or they don't say Satan, they say unto him, art thou brought low like unto us? In other words, the jig is up. Here Satan's coming in chains into hell, and they said, you promised to save us, and now he's
where's our promises? Yeah.
Where's our promise of immunity? So you see, secret combinations of power have been ever since Abraham 5, with the history of Cain, who was master mayhem and perdition before the world was, said Abraham chapter 5.
Tell them guys that they ain't welcome, cause they can't see past girl and drugs. Chains at G, I'm blowing up. Same old team, that's how I does. They've got peas, but I got sense blood, and they can't see why I get love. Let me show them why.
Okay, brothers and sisters, we have Brother SKOUSEN, and I have sunken lips. That's what Joel said to me when he comes on. He goes, you have sunken lips. And I'm like, yes, I look 20 years older than you now. No, I don't look, well, I don't think I even look 20 years younger, because Joel is astounding. He looks like a young whippersnapper. And I can say whippersnapper and look old when I do it with my sunken lips. All right, here we go. Today, okay, so Joel usually comes on once a month, and you just got off a plane, didn't you? You just came right in and jumped on this.
Well, it was my own plane. I was doing a campaign speech up in Idaho for my run for the presidency, trying to get the Idaho ballot. So it was a very successful meeting with Stand Up Idaho, a very good organization in Idaho.
Good. So things are going. So you're still a candidate?
Yes, I'm on a candidate in Nevada and Utah, and shooting for Idaho as well as a write-in candidate in California, Arizona, and Washington, probably.
Wow. You know what? I think you would be one, and I'm not just saying this. I think you should be in. If Trump, I know you think he's not going to win, and it would be stupid for me to say that they're not going to cheat again, because they definitely are. Why would they do it 4 years ago and then not do it now, and even up their strategies a little bit more? But I would say that you would be a good asset to the Trump administration, one way or the other. But let's just hope for the best, I guess. Okay, so today, Joel usually comes on once a month, but I asked him to come on. This is a special debut. I want to do less talking, though, because I can't talk very well. But we're talking about Karl Marx. Joel and I watched this clip, but these are things that Joel already knew. But he watched this clip, he and I, with the one with Jordan Peterson, where he is speaking to with Paul Kenger. It was Jordan Peterson and Dr. Paul Kenger, and they were talking about Karl Marx and what most people don't delve into, except for maybe a fringe group like ourselves. And that is that Marxism and Luciferianism and Satanism there is correlation there.
We don't know why he turned to atheism. These poems that he wrote that were pans to Mephistopheles, is that after he becomes an atheist?
No, he's writing, so the first one was 1837, wrote another in 1841. He wrote a bunch of them.
Right.
He did just a chilling play called Ulanem.
Yes.
Oulanem. And people that are watching this, if they now type into their computer Ulanem, even in Google, it'll pop up. Play by Karl Marx.
Yeah.
It even has a Wikipedia entry. And let me warn people, you might not want to do this, but if you click the images button, you will see, there's some satanic stuff up there from like, not heavy metal, but like black metal groups. So Ulanem is an anagram for Emmanuel or Emmanuello.
Right.
So Marx takes Emmanuel, which is the name given to Christ, or Emmanuello, and he flips it into this anagram called Ulanem. And it's this chilling play. The main character is Lucindo, Lucindo. And you just can't believe what you're reading with this play. Mm-hmm. So that was written later in the 1840s. So really, the prime of his writing, including the decade when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, is also the same decade when he was writing these poems
and plays.
And throughout his life, his kids and others would say, he had a favorite line always from Mephistopheles. Everything that exists deserves to perish. So that remains a part of him throughout his life. His son, Edgar, has a letter where he addresses his father as "my dear devil," which I don't know. Maybe it's playful. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although I would never, call my dad "my dear devil." His wife called him "my wicked knave." I quote Henrik Heinzen, referring to him as a goblin who tried to take me under his spell. Other cases of where he's using that kind of language. When Engels first met him, he describes him as this dark man from Trier, who hops and leaps and springs on his heels. The monster of 10,000 devils, he describes him. And the letter from his father is, which was written in 1837, a year before his father died. So his father writes to him, March 2nd, 1837. Karl, at times my heart delights in thinking of you and your fortune, and yet at times I cannot rid myself of ideas which arouse in me sad forebodings and fear when I am struck as if by lightning by the thought, is your heart in accord with your head, your talents? Has it room for the earthly but gentler sentiments which in this veil of sorrow, it's a beautiful letter in many ways, are essentially consoling for a man of feeling? And then this question from the father of Karl Marx to his at this point, 18-year-old son. And since that heart, Karl, is obviously animated and governed by a demon, not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian? Will you ever, and that is not the least painful doubt of my heart, will you ever be capable of truly human domestic happiness? And this doubt has no less tortured me since I have come to love a certain person like my own child. Will you ever be capable of imparting happiness to those immediately around you? By the way, the answer was no, right?
Well,
but that
obviously
phrase,
the father had intimations of that.
Yeah, and since that heart is obviously animated and governed by a demon not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian? That's his dad.
Yeah.
And there's only so many of those things, I think, that a sympathetic Marxist or Marxist biographer can shrug off. I mean, there's just so many statements like that from him and people about him and people who knew him and loved ones and a wife, a son, a best friend from Engels, and then the different writings. Whew.
Okay, so let's attack this.
Now, was he a Satanist, right?
Well,
that is a whole different thing that I can't personally answer.
Well, it seems not unreasonable to presuppose that he was a devotee of the Mephistophelian ethos.
Yeah, I think that's
right. So
really
the question is, what constitutes a Satanist? Well, someone who generates a murderous doctrine, that raises questions. I mean, dead serious about that. Like
right.
The most murderous doctrine ever promoted in the roughly Judeo-Christian context by a large margin. So I would say it's incumbent on those who would defend him to describe why we wouldn't just assume that. But the part of the reason that I was so interested in talking to you was because I felt that what you documented in your book was extraordinarily telling from the psychological perspective, because I know how these things work. And it is not something that can be overlooked, that was his favorite quote.
Right.
I mean, especially not when you understand Goethe's centrality in the German intellectual tradition. That's like having a favorite quote from Shakespeare, right? And it's not any old quote. It's the central credo of Mephistopheles. So that's extraordinarily telling. Now, I do have another.
Can I give you a...
Yes.
So Robert Paine, the very serious academic, no right-winger, British man of letters, the guy who really broke this first in his 1968 biography of Marx, all right? His chapter where he talks about this stuff is called The Demons in his Marx biography. Now, he wrote this, and I'm not saying that I endorse this. As an academic, I can't say if this is correct. There were times when Marx seemed to be possessed by demons. That's what Paine wrote. And now this I would at least more endorse. Marx had the devil's view of the world and the devil's malignity. Sometimes he seemed to know that he was accomplishing works of evil. I think that gets closer to it. Now, Pastor Richard Wurmbrand, who wrote the famous book Tortured for Christ, and was tortured for Christ in Romanian prisons by communist captors who were shouting, "I am the devil," while they were torturing him. He did a book called Marx and Satan. He's convinced that Marx was a Satanist and did some things ritualistically that it might have even been satanic. But I can't say that. I can't endorse that.
But you see evidence of that in his play.
I've never seen...
In terms of at least his fantasies.
That's right. That's right. In fact, Paine even goes so far as to say, Vladimir Lenin, right? There's a statement from Lenin which said, when I was a teen, I broke from all religion. I took the cross from my neck and I threw it in the rubbish bin. And Paine has a quote where, not Paine, Richard Wurmbrand, where I think he believes that Lenin even stomped on it. He says, well, that's a satanic ritual. I don't know. I don't know that it is or not. But there's another case of Lenin who at least did the work of the devil. I mean, Lenin had, according to Robert Conquest, W.H. Chamberlain, the first historian of the Russian Revolution, 500,000 people were killed from 1917 to 1923 under Lenin, not even including the Russian Civil War. If that's not the devil's work, I don't know what the hell is, right? But I think what Paine said in the latter quote, the devil's view of the world, the devil's malignity, and at the very least, this identification with kind of devilish-like destruction, right? Tearing everything down, rebelling against the world, everything that exists deserves to perish. That at least, and then the ideology that he created that just happened to be responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people in the 20th century, more than World War I and World War II combined. So that ideology was pretty hellacious.
To say the least. Okay, so, and I think it's very naive not to assume that the events that we described in Marx's life are not connected, right?
Yeah,
right.
Correct.
And that his economic polemics were somehow independent of his poetic imagination. It's like, obviously they weren't, because they wouldn't have had that motivational force. So they were calling on dark forces, obviously. So, because otherwise they wouldn't have compelled people in that manner, especially not toward that sort of immense sadistic murderousness and utter destructiveness.
And of course, get to the hatred of God, which all the communists did. So all the communists thereafter seek to ban religion.
Right. Atheists.
That's
right.
They're
not exactly atheists because they're trying to stomp something out.
That's right. It's not a
neutrality.
That's right. It's not a neutrality toward religion. It's not irreligion. It's not separation of church and state. It is militant, aggressive atheism. Trotsky and Lenin create the League of the Militant Godless.
Right.
They ban religion. They have the Moscow church trials. They blow up churches. They jail priests, right? The Solzhenitsyn writes in the Gulag Archipelago, they put nuns in special sections of the Gulag with prostitutes.
Yes, right.
Deem them whores to Christ.
Absolutely.
Lenin said, all worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. There is nothing more abominable abominable than religion.
Yeah.
So they don't just try to stop religion. They want Pol Pot, the Buddhist monks in Cambodia, to renounce their vows, to marry. Yeah. It's not enough for them to be quiet. And so
I don't know how you can separate a militantly anti-religious atheism from especially, say, within a Christian context, from something approximating satanic ideology. Because I don't see how conceptually that separation is possible. It's one thing to be atheist in the manner that leaves people to go to hell in a handbasket in their own way, but to be actually an enemy of the religious enterprise, that's a whole different thing.
It is.
So, and that obviously Marx and the communists were obviously that, clearly, obviously.
And Satan might say, I don't care if you believe in me or not, you're doing my work, man. I mean, you're shutting down churches, blowing up churches.
That also touches on the issue of what it means to believe, right? And I mean, you could imagine someone comparatively harmless who toys with ritualistic satanic activities in a sort of dramatic manner. And then you could imagine someone who tortures nuns and priests and burns down churches, but forgoes any technical affiliation with Satan.
Right.
I would say that the latter is the Satanist in a much deeper sense than the former. Not that what the former is doing is excusable.
Yeah, or at least satanic.
Yes, right. But to do what the communists did to the religious enterprise is evidence of something far more militant than a mere atheism.
Where do you want to begin with this? Because I wanted to ask you about Karl Marx, and if you think it's coincidental that the Communist Manifesto was produced not even a decade, maybe a decade and a half after the restoration of the gospel came forth, and there's some very eerie coincidences or not coincidences. Where would you like to start with this?
Well, we can start with that idea. You know, the gospel restored about 1830, major coup for the Lord to restore this. And so he has to give Satan equal time. And so, you know, that shortly after that, you had Karl Marx's manifesto, and you also had then Darwin's evolutionary doctrine, which is anti-God as well. And so these are counters which the Lord allows Satan to mount against the restoration. And you know, it's sad as a commentary now that we have the restored church talking about trying to integrate evolution and socialism and communism into the gospel in rather woke terms. It's very unfortunate, but you know, this is going to get corrected someday by the Lord, because there is no compatibility between the gospel and evolution or socialism as well. And while the church leaders try to make peace with the many movements of socialism and communism, there is no peace to be had, because these are satanic movements meant to counter the Lord, and there can be no accommodation between the two.
Yeah. No. And so it definitely wasn't a coincidence that Karl Marx met some guy named Frederick Engels. Is that his name?
Engels, yes.
Engels. Yes. And this was 1844 that Marx began working on his first book about Marxism while living in Paris. And if you guys ever delve into the type of character that Karl Marx, he was a lazy, indolent
intellectual,
not unlike people today.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And he neglected his family. He lived off the dole. In fact, it ended up being globalists out of Britain, Lord Milner and other globalists, that ended up funding Marx.
Wow. Well, then that's not coincidental either. The same people that were funding Vladimir Lenin. Right?
That's right.
And others, because I'm kind of jumping over here for a second, but wasn't communist kind of an experiment? Communism? Wasn't communism kind of an experiment?
Well, it was the most radical form of socialism where you do it by force, and you confiscate property, and that's why communism has such a bad rap. Is because it was ruthless when they took over, Moscow and the Soviet Revolution. They took people's homes and made them put hundreds of other poor people in the home, and there was no leader, there's no owner of the home. He had no power, to distribute what rooms they would be in. It's just pure chaos.
Right.
And
Well,
the so-called dictatorship of the proletariat is a myth. Communism, like every major dictatorial regime, has made themselves wealthy. There is no dictatorship of the proletariat. They don't let them rule at all.
no.
It's only the elite, but they are a ruthless elite. They aren't an intellectual elite or a religious elite. They're just plain a satanic elite. And it's, you posed the question to me originally, is communism a religion? Well, it's really an anti-religion. There are satanic religions which have certain rites and ordinances trying to mimic in large degree, the kingdom of God. And ultimately, in the overall satanic view, of course, Satan is trying to dethrone God and create himself as the God of this world. He's very proud of that title, that I am the God of this world. And so what you have to do to understand communism is the Faustian pact. The Faustian pact is where the Lord has, or where Satan has promised, if you help me overthrow God and his kingdom, I will make you wealthy and I will make you famous. And there have many iterations of the Faustian pact, not only with Faust itself. For example, many rock bands of the most horrible acid type rock have admitted, that they've had a pact with the devil. They were promised to be wealthy. I think Andrew Lloyd Webber, for example, in writing the Phantom of the Opera, had made a pact with the devil. Not to mention that there were some of the songs that were plagiarized from other classical music and things, but nevertheless, he was revealed to him some very dramatic melodies, which were very catchy. And Phantom of the Opera is a very dark opera. It's about, coming to the dark side and rejecting the light and all those types of things. Those are indications of a satanic pact with the devil, and it made tremendous hits around the world. He became fabulously wealthy. And of course, Andrew Lloyd Webber created Joseph and the Technicolor Coat, which was a rock opera demeaning Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, and other things. But going back to the Faustian Pact, this is what's very important to understand. The core of the larger globalist conspiracy, which we deal with, which I'm an expert in running a deep state, which is their enforcement mechanism within government, is the promise of immunity from your illegal acts on earth. And we'll cover for you. And nothing's more telling about that is the fact that the Biden family and the Clinton family have had immunity for years, and they never get prosecuted for very, very obvious sins, of which Donald Trump is being prosecuted for. But Satan takes the Faustian Pact one step further. He promises these higher level people like Marx and Engels and frankly Lenin, who's very much a satanic person. I mean, I've never seen a man who looks more satanic than Vladimir Lenin.
Right. He has that epitomized look of the devil.
Oh,
All
yes.
he's missing is the horns and the
horns,
pitchfork.
That's right. Yeah. But you see, the essence of the Faustian Pact is I will give you immunity from the chains of hell. Meaning, if you help me overthrow God, you'll never suffer in hell. And that's a big draw for these people who buy into it. It's one thing to have immunity from your sins on earth, but even Bill Clinton, who was raised as a Christian, knows that there's a hell that he's going to have to face someday.
Yeah.
So at the various higher levels, and I'm not saying this kind of revelation occurs at mid-levels or lower levels of the globalist conspiracy or the deep state, but only at the very highest levels, he promises these people immunity from the chains of hell. And the proof of that is in Isaiah chapter 14. Now, it's parsed out within the chapter. You won't read this as I'm going to describe it, but it's all there. If you read chapter 14, you'll see what I'm describing, and you have to piece it together because they're separated by a few verses. But in essence, he describes a vision where he sees all of the great and powerful men of the earth in hell, suffering in hell, waiting for Satan to come, waiting for he that was going to thrash the world to come and save them. Now you see, that smacks of the Faustian pact, the promise, I will save you from hell. And then he says to them, or Isaiah says, and they see he that was going to thrash the world descend into chains, and they say unto Satan, or they don't say Satan, they say unto him, art thou brought low like unto us? In other words, the jig is up. Here Satan's coming in chains into hell, and they said, you promised to save us, and now he's
where's our promises? Yeah.
Where's our promise of immunity? So you see, secret combinations of power have been ever since Abraham 5 and the history of Cain, who was master mayhem and perdition before the world was, said Abraham chapter 5. And it's very interesting that you'll never find any commentary in the church that discusses this crucial aspect of Abraham 5 and the Lord calling Cain perdition before the world was. It's not in the commentary. Because why? It overcomes the myth in the church that we were all goody two-shoes in the pre-existence, and that everyone who came to earth had to raise their arm to the square and buy into the atonement and swear allegiance to Jesus Christ. It is not true at all. It's true that a third of the hosts of heaven decided that we've been so rebellious even in the pre-earth life, there's no way we're going to pass the earth test, so we're not going. But Satan, of course, put many people down, like Cain, who had made pacts with Satan to come and represent him here on earth. And I think Marx and Lenin and Darwin and other people, even though Darwin claims to have been religious people, he was really anti-religion. Evolution was a replacement for God, so that you did not need God for creation. It's a very evil philosophy. It's a denial of the command and control which God has over the elements. Because you see, in evolution, how can you tell if anything's random when there's command and control in the universe? You can't tell ever if anything's random. Even the fruit fly experience was supposedly have random changes every 24 hours.
Right.
You can't tell if that's random or not when there's command and control. Because you don't know if the Lord's playing games with the earth we know he does. When this earth was put together, there are many pseudo-scholars in the church that have tried to explain away the billions of years of the earth material vis-a-vis the creation, essentially denying the 1,000-year series of creation. But they don't realize, as Brigham Young said, that the Lord created, he got this from Joseph Smith, the Lord created this earth from other planets. And we don't know if the dinosaurs actually lived here or not.
Right.
They were actually layers taken from other planets and build up layer upon layer. And, many of those fossils and pre-Adamic man, never lived here, because the scriptures are very clear. Adam was the first man and the first flesh on the earth. There was no pre-Adamic man and no pre-Adamic animals. And so it just doesn't work to have evolution. But the point is that Satan is, the Lord plays along with this game. He needs these kinds of things to give people the excuse not to believe in God, not to believe in creation. And it's a sad commentary to see so many intellectuals in the church falling into this trap, especially at BYU.
Yeah, that's very true. And they are coming from within the church now. And it's like the frog in the boiling water, that it just gradually took over all of the philosophies of men, mingling them with scripture, just like you learn in the temple. I find it interesting. You mentioned occultism and anti-religion, but would you say that there is some synthetic or hints of hermeticism and occultism? In other words, does Satan use the same esoteric principles that we use in the temple? You know how we have that high church liturgy in the temple where we do these rites and we are making covenants with our Heavenly Father. Is it true that Satan does is he the antithesis of that? Is he inverting everything that the Lord does, and why?
Well, he tries to emulate as far as possible. I mean, he tries to create a triumvirate. I'm sure that with the highest levels of globalism and the revelatory nature with Satan, that he has his own version of 12 apostles or leaders. Now, we don't know this because this is the best kept secret in the world. But we do know in the Masonic order, which they did attempt to emulate. Now, Satan got these things from Abraham, who gave them into
Okay.
Egypt.
That's
into
what
Egypt.
yeah.
That he created the Masonic order with some of the signs and tokens, but there is no relationship whatsoever between the covenants and pacts in the Masonic order and in what is the temple. But yes, there is this very clear attempt to emulate the power structure, the robes of the holy priesthood, so to speak. And I hate to see, for example, the church falling into this trap in education, the robes of the education priesthood, as you nimbly called them.
Yeah,
where you have these multicolored robes and multiple stripes showing rank and privilege. It's like the chief seats of the synagogue.
The false robes of the priesthood.
Yeah. We shouldn't be involved in creating hierarchy within the church and worship of leaders and hierarchy. It's very interesting. One of the unpublished revelations that came out in B.H. Roberts' book on the 70 was about, I think it was George Albert. No, I think maybe it was Joseph S. Smith. I may be corrected on this, but apparently the early saints were not paying due attention to the leadership of the church. It was high Powell Brigham and this and that. There wasn't any. And so the Lord said, they should pay greater honors to the leaders of the church that I have chosen. And so since then, we have had this great honorific system within and it's now morphed into the fact that everybody rises when a general authority walks into a sacrament meeting, which probably shouldn't be. That's taking hero worship and general authority worship, to a degree that's probably not warranted. Addressing a prophet of the Lord by, rather than Brother Nelson, President Nelson, or Brother Nelson the prophet, that's very appropriate. But I think we have to be careful about establishing an elite class within the church. And to a certain extent, you see, the general authorities foment this at conference. They have a general authority family, so to speak. It's almost like a stake family. You're part of the stake leadership, so you have a stake family. You socialize together. You have dinners for the stake family, and the general authorities are the same way.
Right.
And we have to be very.
And part of that might be because they're having meetings all the time together and stuff too, right?
Well, that's true, but you have to be very, very careful about creating an exclusive club where the members worship the position rather than the humility that the position should entail, because it's a great responsibility to be a prophet of God, and a prophet isn't always a prophet. A prophet's only a prophet when he speaks by the Spirit of the Lord. And you see, when you have this honorific thing, then you tend to have people say whatever the prophet says has to be true because it can't lead us astray. Of course, we've talked about that before, how the promise of the Lord was only that he would not let the leaders intentionally lead the church astray. It didn't mean that he wouldn't allow. There have been unintentional errors from all the prophets throughout all the ages.
Yeah.
And the Lord tolerates that for testing purposes, so that people who want to find an excuse to criticize the church or the brother can easily do so.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that about, the little circles that the leaders would have. I don't know if they do this as much in Utah, but when they come out here, the stake, the Relief Society will put on a dinner and they'll have some meal, some luncheon in the cultural hall, but it'll be an exclusive luncheon just for the stake leaders, their wives, the general authority, the 70 that came, and his wife, and whoever, but it's not for the members of the church. And there was a time, though, that we had a general authority come. I can't remember who it was, but there were some people out in the foyer and they were new converts, and you could smell the food being cooked in the chapel, where you walk in and they're preparing food in the kitchen. And I think it was in between sessions of a Saturday state conference on Saturday. And so the general authority and his wife, they're going in to the culture hall, and the stake president's going in there, and it's just for them. It's maybe for 20 people, but there was plenty of food. Well, the general authority stops. I remember, because I was in the stake, and he comes back out and he tells these people to come in and eat with them. And I found that relieving, because these people, I don't know if they were hungry or not, but they did smell the food, and they were new to the church. So they're thinking, oh, they're putting on a dinner, and I just found that exactly what you're saying. The elitism can creep in, and we don't even know it sometimes, that we're worshiping man. We're worshiping education. We're worshiping the scholar.
We're worshiping credentials.
Yes.
And that's a problem, because, there's a difference between the Lord's credentials in calling someone and, secular and other credentials. But to a certain extent, we also have to be careful, because, as President Lee told my Uncle Cleon, he said, when he told Cleon, I want you to stop criticizing government, and Cleon said, well, are you speaking for yourself or for the Lord? And he said, well, you don't understand, Clem. We haven't received direct revelation in many years. In the absence of revelation, we do what we feel is best, and we expect the Lord to correct us if we're wrong. But what if the Lord doesn't correct? You see, the Lord has testing purposes. I mean, very few general authorities are ever called by direct revelation, including apostles. It's done by the recommendation system. And basically, they pass the list around, and those that others feel uncomfortable cross the name off the list. So you end up with your most mainstream, acceptable leaders that become general authorities. And so there's a great deal of camaraderie within brethren. They say, well, we're all unified. Well, that's no wonder, because they only pick the people who nobody objects to.
Yeah.
And so, as Professor Jackson of BYU told me, we were working together in the temple, and he said, we just had a faculty meeting at BYU, and we were told by the president of the university, we're never going to have another Hugh Nibley, Truman Madsen, or Cleon SKOUSEN at BYU. Everybody who's going to teach has to come up through the seminary and institute system and be vetted, so that they preach the gospel line. And that's a sad commentary, that you don't want any original thinkers at the university. And he thought that I would be particularly interested in being a SKOUSEN in that statement that he heard.
Well, I mean, and what we're talking about, folks, getting back, we kind of diverted a little bit, but these are good points that Brother SKOUSEN's making, that this is satanic within itself, because if we're talking about ominous correlations and the dangers of Marxism and of thought, especially dialectical thought, which brings me to my next question, talking about human rights and the dangers of Marxist thought. How can you relate these ideologies to the oppressive ideologies like Marxism, correlating it with Satanism, including the role of critical theory in perpetuating oppressive ideological thoughts? What are we seeing today, in other words, in layman's terms, in the news? What's going on? Every time there's an election, we see these people in black. It reminds me of maybe a war in heaven going on. It's continued from the premortal life, and it's going on today, right?
Well, yes, it certainly is, Troy. And it's a very sophisticated game now to differentiate, because you see, most people, when they think about satanic influence, they think dark, brooding, weird rituals, ritual murder, and sacrifice of idols and images and things. But Satan is much more sophisticated than that. And I teach this in my essay on conscience, the still small voice of conscience, which is at joelskousen.com, that there are actually two voices or three voices inside your brain that you listen to. There's your own reasoning and your own grammar and your own syntax. And there's the Lord's promptings and warnings that come to you. And then there's Satan. And all three mimic your own thoughts and syntax, because the Lord doesn't want you to realize it'd be obvious that it's coming from him, and neither does Satan. And so people don't realize that you don't have to feel dark, brooding feelings for Satan to have influence on you. In fact, he is there all the time. He knows your innateness, and I mean by innateness, the proclivities that you developed before you came here. We weren't all goody two-shoes. We weren't all close to the Lord. We weren't all sitting at the feet of the Lord, raising our arms.
No, we weren't.
The same type of personality that you have here on earth, you had before then. If you are addicted to people and people approval, you were so addicted before you came here. That's because how you became hardened. If you were shy and bashful, you were shy and bashful before you came here. If you were aggressive and bullying and other things, you were aggressive before you came here. And so the Lord basically in his promptings is trying to work on your innateness and your problems. You get promptings because he knows you're resistant to them. Otherwise, why bother prompting you? He knows you're going to be resistant to getting up. He knows you're going to be resistant to losing weight. He knows you're going to be resistant to working hard. So he prompts you and prompts you. And then Satan is right there, always. And if you start to listen to these things, you always realize Satan right there saying, oh, it's okay. You don't remember, Satan is giving you the comfort voice. The Lord is pushing you. And we've reversed that in the church. Now we're saying God is all conditionally loving, soft, and comfortable, and Satan is the negative pusher. If you're feeling negative, it's from Satan. No, no, no.
It might be the topsy-turvy.
In many cases, it's the Lord that's criticizing and making you feel uncomfortable because you have made a wrong decision. And it's the Satan who's feeding you the comfort line. Oh, no, it's all right. You can get away with this.
Right.
You can have that third helping. You can diet later. If people read that essay and they start to say, oh, yeah, I know that voice. He's always there. But you see, in the church, we're preaching comfort alone. And comfort is of the devil in the sense there are certain people, of course, have been shattered by sin and other things that they need some comfort. But they're the rare minority. Most of us are resistant to change, and it's Satan who's feeding us the comfort message that God loves you no matter what you do. So you don't have to ever feel uncomfortable. But Satan is training you to feel and resist the promptings of the Lord, making you feel uncomfortable. He's training you to resist, and we should not be emulating that in our church doctrine. Training people to think that the Lord will always be comforting and accepting of us no matter what we do, because that's not how conscience works. We feel instantly unacceptable in that specific instance when we decide to do something in rebellion to what we know is true. And it doesn't have to be a huge feeling. It can sometimes be a small one. The Lord is testing your ability to hear the little tiny promptings, and they are tiny. They're so easy to resist and wipe away if you don't have a lot of self-control. But people need to wake up to the fact that Satan is ever present in your mind, just like the Lord is ever present waiting to correct and to prompt. And you need to recognize when and who is talking to you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because when I started learning about conspiracy, it kind of painted would you say that those who learn conspiracy can get a broader picture of who Satan is and his minions? That he doesn't necessarily,
especially about the sophistication of conspiracy.
That's what I mean.
Really sophisticated.
And the structure and the organization and his higher motives. People go, well, Satan's working on you because he hates you. Well, I think he's thinking bigger than that. I think it's the same reason the politicians today, like Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton, want us to feel bad about ourselves. Yeah, they don't like us, but they have a broader agenda in mind. And it's I think that the devil hates Heavenly Father's plan of salvation. And he doesn't think, from the beginning, he had so much ego and pride. He wanted his way to work. The same reason that any dictator and totalitarian regime wants their ideas to work, not so much for the benefit of mankind, but because of their own self-aggrandizement and their own selfish ambition. Would you say that? Or is there something in Satan's mind that says, I really wanted to bring everybody back to God?
Well, look, Satan understands the weaknesses of human nature. He understands that people don't like judgment when it's critical of them. He understands that there's a great attraction to socialism because socialism offers you the same reward or higher rewards than what the free market's going to give you. That's the essence of socialism. If everybody gets the same reward, that means that the higher achievers are going to get pulled down and the lower achievers are going to get pulled up to get rewards that they don't deserve. So it's the antithesis of incentive. It destroys incentive, you see, and it makes people. So you see, Satan is an expert at this, and he knows our innateness just like God knows our innateness, and so he's playing in favor. And so Satan is hateful against people who understand him and are fighting against him. I mean, I felt the hatred of Satan. He knows I understand exactly what he's doing. But he doesn't show that same hatred to other people who are susceptible to his enticements. He gives them the comforting, loving message. Come with me. It's like Phantom of the Opera. That beautiful melody, come with me into the dark of the night. Come with me. That's not a message of hate. That's a message of enticement. So people have to really rearrange their brain to understand that Satan is, in most cases now, enticing people, not with outright temptation, just enticing them and giving them messages that match what their comfort level is, and then helping them feel uncomfortable about anything the Lord pushes them to do. The Lord is after you. He isn't satisfied with what you are. He's not in the business of giving comfort, except to the very few who have so screwed up their lives that they are suicidal and they need some comfort. All right. But for the most of us, the comforting message is coming from Satan, and God is pushing you and prompting you and warning you about this.
Passivity. All is well in Zion, right? That's a comforting message.
Yeah.
Right. So when I look at Elon Musk and he says that George Soros hates humanity, I would say that's probably Satan too. You know, even though George Soros is a tool of Satan, I'm just using him as an example. But going on to,
let me just correct that though. He doesn't hate humanity. He hates those of us who are fighting against him. And against the satanic, he hates us. But he does not hate humanity because he views them as manipulable, soft, and weak.
Right.
And you see, those are the potential gathering that he's going to gather in. So he does not hate his own. Remember, love is the attraction of like to like. Never forget that God is perfect. He can only love that which is good and true in terms of approval type. Only love that which is good and true. The rest of us that are not good and true, the parts of it, he sees parts of us. So the parts of us that are not good and true, that are still weak and slovenly, he has that outstretched arm calling for us to come back. That's what prompting. But you don't feel that as approval of. You feel that as guilt feelings.
Motivational. Yeah.
And motivational. But it is a portion of his love calling you back to truth and goodness. But and Satan has that opposite. He has that arm outstretched for your weaknesses, calling you to give in to your weaknesses.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump to, so we talked about Karl Marx a little bit. I think enough, probably, where we understand communism, socialism, Marxism. I didn't get into, like Engels and Hermeticism and the differences that Karl Marx had with others and their ideologies that were similar but not the same. I also mentioned to folks that we would talk a little bit about people like Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, Aleister Crowley, Noam Chomsky. Who's the other guy there's Noam Chomsky and there's Albert Pike. Yeah. Are some of these people not even relevant? How would you start with this? I have some questions though.
They're all Marxist intellectuals, or at least satanic driven.
They're satanic general authorities, right?
They are.
Right.
And they play a very sophisticated role. Noam Chomsky was a very gregarious people. My brother worked with Noam Chomsky at University of Texas. And Chomsky hated my brother because he could sense, he was a linguist, and he was destroying Chomsky's linguistic theory.
Wow.
And he hated him for him. He drove him out of the University of Texas. The only reason he got to BYU, who were disciples of Chomsky in the linguistics department, is that BYU hired him into the English department, where he taught linguistics, opposing the Chomsky view. And it was very interesting. But Chomsky was a Marxist. And
Saul Alinsky, that's what I was thinking of. Rules for Radicals. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very radical. Now, Albert Pike was, of course, one of the fathers of the Masonic movement. And the famous so-called vision of Albert Pike, when he talked about the three wars and talked about, that really is fake. That really has no basis.
Is it really?
Yeah, somebody else created that in his name.
Well, he did call Lucifer the light bearer, right?
Yes.
Right.
So these are satanic people, but they're very sophisticated. The intellectuals, very couched. I was just reading a book picked up by another leftist journalist in the church about the history of the church. It was Coke Newell. And on the back of the book, I looked at who recommended the book, and there it was. Bushman, Susan Easton Black, all the liberals, the historian liberals of the church.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I cracked it open, and there it was. He left the door open to evolution. He said the church has never made a definitive statement. Well, some brethren really have made definitive statements. He left the door open about creationism and compatibility with evolution in billions of years. And it's no wonder the Bushmans of the world loved it. But he was church PR at the time that he wrote the book.
Wow.
I don't think he actually believed a lot of it, just like Bushman, but he doesn't believe a lot of the restoration.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if you take some of these people, for instance, Masonry, we know that it has nothing to do with what goes on in the temple, but is there power? Who's our scholar in the church? The old guy that we love.
Hugh Nibley.
Hugh Nibley. Thank you. When Hugh Nibley goes to Egypt and he's showing all the things about, the compass and the square and putting the hand on the shoulder and welcoming into the next life and having sentinels and just everything that we do in the temple, basically, that's related. Maybe because the children of Israel were there at one time as servants or slaves. Who knows, right? But
and Abraham was there to
Abraham, teach them. Right. Is there power? Is there a reason why Satan also uses that? Or would you just say that Masonry was just a coincidence that he's using just any organization? Or is there power even on the flip side from those symbols as well, like the compass and the square?
No, there is no power inherent in the symbols. Symbols are only symbols. There's only power in the priesthood, except that the Lord allows counterfeits to the priesthood to have some power that they might deceive. For example, there are very many accounts in the Catholic Church of exorcism, and they really do exorcise devils out of people without the priesthood. And they say, certain words over them, and they have been quite successful. They do more exorcism than the church has even thought about doing. So how do you say that happens? They don't have the priesthood of the Lord to do that. Well, the Lord has various testing purposes. He doesn't want it to be very obvious that only the church has the truth, that only miracles occur in the church. He spreads miracles around so that people can have confidence in whatever church they want to believe in. There are answers to prayer in various churches, and Satan has a role in that too, of making sure that he withdraws from people under Catholic exorcism, even though they don't have the priesthood, because it gives the impression that, which he wants, that they do have priesthood power.
Yeah.
So it's a very complex world. It's not black and white. And people have to realize the Lord has he throws a lot of curveballs at life and has many testing purposes.
Well, there was a time where Satan was asked something in the temple about his garb. And he says, this is an emblem of my priesthoods and powers. So, I'm not going to get into that. But I often wonder why some of that stuff is being omitted, but I don't want to go there right now. I know you're like, I could go on another hour about that, Troy. But I would say that we are not immune to the philosophies of man creeping into the church. If we go back esoterically to the principles of truth, I do not also think it's a coincidence that Satan took away every great parts, the most valuable parts of true Christianity, and left it void. It's very interesting. He took away ordinances, rituals, everything, and it has a very dry, plain. When I'm talking about the Protestant religions of the day, there's nothing there, but he kept his principles in his rights. You know what I mean?
Yes, but that's not where the power of even Christianity lied, in the rights and the ordinances. The power in Christianity originally by God was the power of judgment and justice. And so
those were just catalysts to kind of help people make promises.
They're just ballpark gateposts to get you in the ballpark. Okay, gotcha. That's all they do. They really have nothing to do with ultimate spirituality. They're supposed to be representative of the spiritual commitments that you make to God, but they are not in and of themselves spiritual. They are temporal symbolism because the Lord knows that people are weak and they need guideposts and they need ritual and they need ordinances in order to do things like that. But, it's like Paul said, the commandments mean nothing to me. Not that I would openly disregard them, but I'm beyond that. I'm living by the Spirit day to day, which is conscience, the promptings of conscience. That's the essence of religion. That's how most of us are going to be judged, is by the hundreds of thousands of promptings of conscience that we told the Lord to get lost, not on the commandments that we don't disobey. Oh, it's fine that you don't disobey them, but you've got to go beyond it. You start to listen to the will of the Lord, and the will of the Lord comes through conscience, not through the scriptures, not through. And the reason I talk about conscience rather than the Spirit of the Lord, because people associate the Spirit of the Lord only with spiritual things. And 99% of all the promptings you get are temporal, because that's where your weaknesses are. And the Lord's trying to get you to overcome the temporal weaknesses. And we don't view those as spiritual. We view those are just superficial worldly guilt feelings that I'm feeling because I'm overweight, or I eat junk food, or I'm addicted to Coke, or other types of things. No. Those are negative promptings of the Lord trying to get you to understand that He does not approve. He's never going to make it a commandment. He doesn't approve. And you tell Him something every day that you violate one of those little, and pretty soon you don't even feel the nervous feelings anymore. People who get addicted to diet drinks and other things, they never feel nervous anymore. It's all long gone. The Lord's given up on them in that regard.
Yeah. I've lost 40 pounds. It's been 2 months, but I've lost 40 pounds. Good, and I'm on my way. And one of these days I'll stand up and show you the rest of my body, but not yet.
Yeah.
And when I get my grill, my new grill, my teeth, everything will be great. How much time do you have left?
I've got about 8 minutes.
Okay. Let's end on this then. Maybe 2 questions. Maybe we won't have time for 2, but anarchism, theosophy, Alice Bailey, or Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt. My question is, were these direct revelations from the adversary, do you think?
Well,
or is this just it's just not rocket science? It's just, do what thou wilt is the opposite of commandments.
It's clearly satanic inspiration.
Okay.
I mean, it goes back to what I say. When people get in the habit of listening to that comforting voice of Satan, they can get tutored very specifically. Now, my uncle Max, Cleon's brother, went off to the deserts of Mexico to fast and pray for 3 days to find a revelation, and he got one. Ended up being from Satan.
Wow.
And he told him how to develop a system that would be very attractive to people. And it doesn't matter if you sin, as long as you learn from that, sin isn't a problem, as long as you learn the lesson. And so he could talk people into basically sinning.
Was he taking peyote at the same time?
But I came back from my mission, and he sat me down in his living room. I stayed overnight with him on my way back from South America, and he told me about this grand revelation he had. I immediately felt a complete darkness about it, that this was of Satan. And he built a whole empire of talks and books and other things around it because it appealed to people.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about sin, because as long as you learn from the lesson, you can experience sin and then move on. Very interesting. But it follows that general flow about Satan enticing people to where you're natural and to overcome guilt feelings. There's no guilt once that. Don't feel bad. You can overcome it. That's working against God's thing.
Yeah. I've got one more thing, and that's it. One more thing, and I think this is good to wrap it all up. The cabal today, we call them the Western globalists, whatever. They're not. We can never put our finger on who's the strongest or the most powerful out of them all, because would you say, and I know you've said it before, these theosophy and other Luciferian type religions, they're not really running things anymore, are they? Or these people aren't under one big umbrella, or we know unseen, Satan's in control of them all.
Yes.
But there is no big, powerful one cabal that has one leader anymore, is there? Or there never was?
There is and there isn't. Satan has diversified so that there are over 300 now globalist organizations that are pushing globalism. He's moved beyond the Masons. He's moved beyond the Illuminati. He's moved beyond those things. And now he's branched out. There's hundreds of these organizations. And there's the WEF and the Aspen Institute and the Bilderberg Group and all of these, the Club of Rome and all of these.
And they're all vying for power, aren't they?
Well, no.
Okay, that's what I kind of want to know.
They're all pushing a globalist agenda in one way, but each of them have their own specialty. Some are pushing it in the WEO, WEF, World Economic Forum is pushing AI robotic society, which will never happen. And he has a home for everybody: the intellectuals, the transhumanists, the intellectuals, the education priesthood. All of those have their own niche in these various organizations. Now, I believe who's ever running the globalist organization, which we never see who's really running the show. We have the Soroses and the Kissingers and Brzezinski and the Klaus Schwab, et cetera, but they aren't the top level. The top level people really never take a public view. But the ones behind the scene do have connections to every one of these 300 plus globalist organizations. They do give guidance in secret from time to time. And then they have training seminars like the Bilderberger Group, is where you bring in people who they think are going to become globalists, and they check their reaction when they talk in secret about what their plans are. And so it's kind of like a priesthood leadership training seminar for Satanists.
It is. It's inverted.
So, but it's very complex now, and it's very difficult to discern. But we really don't need to know who is at the top level. We can track globalism in the deep state. when they operate, because they're working against liberty. They're working for a future war. They've been building Russia and China, and they've now reversed course and attacking at least Russia, not yet China, because they've got to be on the right side of the war when the war starts. But Russia and China are not the good guy. They're intending to attack us. The globalists are just helping them have an excuse to do so.
Thank you so much, Joel, for being here. And I think that's a good thing to end on, is it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what it looks like. We don't care what Satan is wearing or eating for dinner, right? Yeah. We care to stay away from it as far as possible.
His power is here on earth, and it's going to get greater. We're not going to win this battle until the second coming. And so we're going to be more and more in a hunkered down defensive position. I mean, it's just like this latest primary election. I can't think of a single constitutional conservative that won election challenging the rhinos and the incumbents. They all lost, every one of them. In Utah and Idaho, even the reddest of states, all of the
we forgot to talk about that. I'm sorry.
All of the really good conservatives lost, and you had the phony conservatives. You see, nobody can get elected in Utah unless they claim to be a conservative Republican. So you have all the Democrats joining the Republican Party and claiming to be conservative and lying through their teeth, and they get elected because we don't have any leadership we have a conservative general consensus, but we have no leadership. We tell people in the church that there are gospel principles in every political party, meaning you can join anything and feel good about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's that lack of leadership that is causing people not to be discriminating against those who are wolves in sheep's clothing, who are abounding now in Congress.
Well, I know we forgot to talk about the debate.
Oh yeah, that's coming up tonight.
Did you want to take 2 minutes or?
Well, I'm delaying putting out the World Affairs Brief until late tonight because I want to watch the debate. I just want to see how they're going to manipulate this against Trump. I mean, Trump to me is a fool for allowing CNN to put on this debate. Of course, maybe that's the only way he could get Biden to agree to a debate, is to have it in the camp of the deep state. But to have Jake Tapper, who has crucified Trump in the media and accused him of all kinds of egregious things, to be one of the moderators, is going to be poison to this. And to be able to shut off the mic if he steps over the bounds, it's going to be interesting. But I'm going to put it out. People on Friday will be able to get a free copy of the World Affairs Brief and read that.
Yeah, the World Affairs Brief. Brothers and sisters, go get it. How much is that a year? $
48 a year, about $1 a week for my analysis from a global.
And he covers it all.
Yeah.
All. And I always have it right here on the screen. Okay, thank you. And in the description section, and pardon my teeth, they will be back soon. All right, okay. Thank you so much, Joel.
You're welcome, Troy.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.